All right. Hello and good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of Navigating NewSpace, produced by the Matthew Isakowitz Fellowship Program. For any new viewers this week, the Matthew Isakowitz Fellowship Program is a highly selective mentorship and summer internship program which nurtures the next generation of leadership in commercial space. My name is Halen Madison. I'm a 2021 fellow in the program and the host of today's episode. In Navigating NewSpace, we interview fellows, our executive mentors from host companies, and other affiliates of the program to help show you the role the fellowship plays in the careers of young leaders in commercial space and keep you up to date with the rapidly changing industry that is NewSpace. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Ed Bolton. Edward L. Bolton is a retired United States Air Force Major General. He also served as a senior executive at the Federal Aviation Administration, where he was the assistant administrator responsible for leading the modernization of the National Airspace System, and as a senior vice president of the Defense Systems Group at Aerospace Corporation. During his military career, Ed served as commander of the 45th Space Wing at Patrick Air Force Base, commander of the 30th Space Wing Operations Group at Vandenberg Air Force Base, and commander of the 30th Spacelift Range Operations Squadron, also at Vandenberg Air Force Base. He completed assignments as the principal deputy to the Chief Operating Office of the National Reconnaissance Office and as director of Air Force Space and Cyber Operations at the Pentagon. While in acquisition, he led the Satellite and Launch Systems and the Space Launch and Range Systems Program offices at the Space and Missile Systems Center at the Los Angeles Air Force Base. He was also on the White House staff during 2 administrations as a director on the National Security Council. He retired from active duty after serving as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Budget. Ed, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Halen. Very nice to meet you. Very nice to meet you. And thank you for stepping in. I understand you were a last-minute substitute. The planned host was down, ill just a little bit, and you just found out you had to step in, and I'll say so far so good. But we're going to kind of keep your report card here.
Thanks so much, Ed. And we're definitely moving on the fly today. This is my first time stepping in as a guest host, but happy to be here and get a chance to talk with you.
Great.
So I think just to get started, I just went through your bio, but I think it'd be awesome just to hear from you, your story about you, how you found yourself in the commercial space sector.
So I would say that, I went to engineering school. I studied microelectronics back when it was busy being invented, and got a job. I was in the Air Force. I went to school on Air Force scholarships. Had the opportunity to work on a peacekeeper guidance system. In those days, you really weren't space engineers, you just brought engineers to be deployed or used anywhere. Over time, I decided that I was going to focus on space, focus on leadership in space, and focus on either operations and program management. So I'd say my career has had 3 components. I've got the piece where I was in school or on staff. That was probably a third of it. The piece I was in acquisition, research and development, developing systems, and the piece doing operational systems. And I think that's, I'll stop right there, and so we can spend more time getting to the other questions.
My apologies. What I wanted to say was how, during that time, has the growth that you've seen from the military side and on the commercial side shaped your career and changed the path that you've taken?
Well, I was very fortunate to be coming up in the Air Force at a time when we started to transition from space that was dominated by the military and by federal entities, and we're transitioning still to a space that's going to be dominated by civilian industries. I was a young major at Headquarters Space Command when a young man named Elon Musk was coming through our office to say he could start a space company, have a viable commercial space company. Of course, the joke we all had back then was, how do you make a small fortune in the space launch business? And the punchline was, start with a big one. So none of us thought he was going to be successful. We were all wrong. And so we had an opportunity, as I grew up in the space business, to really see the foundation of what's coming to fruition right now. I would also add, though, as if I were coming and looking at commercial space now, I would do something that Elon Musk has done very well. I would work hard to leverage what's already been learned. if you walk the hallways of his company, you're gonna see Glenn Shotwell's the CEO. She started Aerospace. That's where Steve Isakowitz is the CEO, and I was the vice president. And many of my former friends and peers are in the hallway. So really, the future to commercial space is going to be built out of the foundation that was made over a generation out of military space.
Thanks so much for adding that perspective. Could you talk a little bit more about how commercial space has been built off of all the work that the military was doing from the early days of the Apollo era up until very recently? During my time in the industry, I've definitely seen how we are very much built on and still rely upon our military partners.
Well, if you look, military, I'll say military and government, because NASA's not military, but it's a government entity, right? Also, the National Reconnaissance Office that does classified things related to satellites, not military, but also government. And the government was the anchor tenant, the foundation, poured the money into the project that put Americans on the moon, did the first classified satellites, did many launches. But if you were to take a look at what the projected launches are, in the past, the launches were largely military. We're going to a future very soon in which 3/4 of the launches will be commercial, right? And so it's important to manage that transformation properly. Right now, the largest owner of launch bases that provide our access are military. Now, I know that each niche is starting to do their own thing, but right now it's a small volume. And right now the government is paying for all that infrastructure. And so we need a smart way to transition to a more commercially viable infrastructure for launch, for radars, optical command transmitters, information management that allow us to really take this explosion we're going to get. The estimate is that the launches are going to increase by about 300 to 500% over the next few years. You're talking $1 trillion industry past my working lifetime, but right in the sweet spot of yours, right? And it's going to be mostly commercial. And the question is, how do we put ourselves in a position to be really number one on the block when it comes to space, continue to be number one on the block?
How do you see the relationship evolving, as you mentioned, opening up these new launch sites? You've spent time on both the Western Range of Vandenberg and then with the Eastern Range, continuing that partnership and trying to keep the U.S. at the number one position as they activate new launch sites like SpaceX's work in Boca Chica. Do you see that the military side is adapting as quickly as the commercial side, or is there work to be done still?
So the military can adapt. I think let me pivot the question a little bit this way and say, what would I focus on going forward? What I'd focus on is documenting the lessons learned and the things that worked, and find ways to have standardized approaches that you can easily transition from organization to organization. Back in the early part of my career, you built a rocket on the pad. Right, and so now you've got a process where you build it in a site that's nearby, and you slide it onto the pad and launch, so you can get the launch throughput up. And so each launch was unique, each approval process was unique, and so standardization, lessons learned, information kits, that is kind of the transformation we need. And it's not as sexy, but it allows you to do rapid things. If you think of what Henry Ford did with the Model T compared to what cars were before that, that's what we need to do in the spacelift business.
That's super interesting. Thank you so much for that. In that same vein, before we get into more leadership and mentorship, I'm just curious, what projects do you see happening in the industry that are most exciting?
Well, so most of us, I was in ninth grade when I first saw Americans walk on the moon, and I was in first grade when those launches first started. I was 3 or 4 years old when we had the first Sputnik launch, and so up to the time that I was 15 years old, space was was in the news in a major way for a very long time. So I think going forward, the major swing points are really going to be pushed by when you put people back on the moon or Mars. I think that's how you capture the imagination and interest, at least of the American population. Right now, it looks like NASA's proposed landing is not going to be in 2024, maybe 2025 or 26. But I think where Americans and others go in space, the hearts and minds and imaginations of those of us left behind follows. And so I think that's the big one, to the moon or to Mars, but it's people outside of this planet, our destiny beyond this planet. I think will be the main driver of the imagination.
Definitely agree. It's very exciting to see the big push towards human space flight, hopefully in the next decade or so. Along that line, during your remaining career, is there any project or element that you're really excited for in the near term that you see or that you're excited to work on?
I'm certainly excited. You know, I've retired twice or three times, depending upon how you count it. And you know, maybe this next time it'll take. So when I think about my career, I'm looking in the rearview mirror. Certainly, I have a passion and energy about helping the next generation. So when Steve asked me, you know, I've known Steve and I were on White House staff together. We were in mid-career, you know, when and on duty when 9/11 happened. You know, some 20-some years ago. So when he asked me if I'd serve as a mentor and be available to do these kinds of discussions, I said of course. So really is trying to help the next generation, you know, be successful is what I'm really focused on, you know, for the remainder of what you might call a career. But literally, I'm largely retired.
Awesome. Well, I think we can pivot directly from there. I'd love to know what you think the role mentorship plays in being successful in this industry.
So I think mentors, and it's something that, yeah. So first of all, mentoring is a subject that can be complex, but I'll make it very simple. A mentor is anyone who you can speak to about something to help give you better understanding. And obviously, your parents were our mentors. Your favorite teachers were our mentors. If you want to make the basketball team and there's a kid down the street who's a little bit better, he does free throws with you, then that's a mentor. And so what you want to do as a mentor is first of all, be available, right? You know, you have to build a one-on-one relationship at some level for people, particularly this younger generation, as I see them, are comfortable opening up and talking to you. And then you have to have some answers and some value. And the first thing you have to speak to is your own experience. You know, time changes, technology changes, but largely the things that make people successful have endured over time. Hard work, energy, focus, having a plan, being prepared, an education, being willing to take some risks, being able to set priorities, being a person who's a closer, right? So if you come into your boss and you say, I have a problem. Okay, great, you're a news reporter. Come in your boss and say, I have a solution. And better yet, I have an opportunity. Here's something you haven't thought of that maybe I can take a look at for you.
And what difference do you think having good mentorship can make in a career?
Well, it can be difficult to measure. Certainly, you know, I had a pretty successful career, but I would say, upon reflection, that nearly every really good opportunity that I came across, that I ended up getting, was something I wouldn't have known about if it weren't for a mentor. So I didn't know they're looking for an Air Force officer to be on the National Security Council. I didn't know that you know, Steve's predecessor needed a senior vice president at Aerospace, and so many of the things that have fallen in my lap were because mentors made me aware of them. Now, and also mentors helped me understand how to prioritize preparation, so when I had an opportunity, I could convince people I could be successful, and then deliver on that promise. So it's tremendous. It's tremendous.
Could you speak a little bit more about how maybe who or how those mentors early on helped you find those opportunities? And were you actively asking them like, hey, what's my next step? Or was it just right place, right time? Just any thoughts there?
Well, so when I was quite young, I read I read a book by Alan Lakein about setting priorities and planning, how to gain control of your time in life. And I had kind of a long range plan, none of which came to fruition, right? None of my long range planning ever really worked out. But as Eisenhower, late President Eisenhower said, plans are worthless, but the planning process is everything. The process on what I want to study in college, the process to determine putting together the good study skills. So I wasn't a naturally gifted student. Putting together the appropriate study skills to make myself a good student. The process of looking through challenges at work and being able to set priorities, which is that's one of the things that I value the most. Everyone has more work than they can do. Everyone, right? Everyone has more demands on their time than they can fill. More people pulling at you. Who is it can come in and look at a situation and say, "Oh, I need to focus on this," and then who can close, who can get it done. Those are kind of the big things that mentors help me with. And throughout my career, and to name names, Ed Rice, he's a retired 4-star, also an African American who is 5 years ahead of me in the Air Force. And when I was up for, and he and I met when I was a captain, and as I had challenges or opportunities, I'd come and talk to him about them. He'd been on White House staff, and I didn't know this until later. When they called him and said, "Hey, do you know a guy named Ed Bolton? Would he work out here?" He said good things. Obviously, my father and my mother were strong mentors of mine. My father had a work ethic that I still have not been able to duplicate. My mother had a vision of what was possible that seemed ridiculous at the time, but it turned out that she was right. And so whenever I stretched myself, and certainly, janitor's son who enlisted in the Air Force as a college dropout to retire as a 2-star general, no one would have thought that was a realistic goal. But my mother would have thought that, right? And of course, the other thing, long range goals, I mean, it's hard to see from, I use basketball as an example, from a junior high school basketball player to the NBA. But it's not hard to see from a junior high school basketball player to a high school basketball player, from a high school basketball player to a starter, from a starter to a walk-on or to college. And so it's more like a ladder, right? You make yourself better one rung at a time. And a mentor is someone who has clarity about what that next rung is. One mentor I had is my older sister married an Air Force officer who was about 15 years ahead of me. I had some challenges with my first boss as my first rating became due. And I called my brother-in-law, Eddie Miles, the late Eddie Miles, and talked to him about it. He says, "No worries, I'll talk to your boss about it." And he did it, and boss came out and says, "Hey, I didn't understand." He gave me a perspective, kind of a thing, and he made it go away. So a lot of people have been there, for me. But you've got to earn your own way. I never worked for the same person twice. I was deep into my career before I ever came to a base the second time. So you've got to earn your keep, right? You got to be, you got to fight at your own weight and get things done. You got to largely deliver. So I hope that adds some clarity. I don't know if that helps you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's an amazing story to hear about your journey and the people within it that have helped so much. I think the next thing I would ask is, now that you have the opportunity to be a mentor for a young professional in the space industry, what do you hope to convey and other lessons learned throughout your career that you think could be helpful to someone just getting started?
Well, I would say that, having worked in operations, having worked in acquisition and engineering, having done headquarters work, I think I could be helpful in how to be successful in any job. I think I have, and I think that I would tell people you need to be prepared for anything. I'm an electrical engineer, started off in microelectronics, but then next thing I knew, I was an operator because I wanted to be a leader. My last job in the Air Force, I was a budget director over a budget of $165 billion. I'm not an expert on budget. I had to go on C-SPAN and brief the Air Force's budget. I think it's still on YouTube somewhere. In about 80 days after taking the job, they delayed it to 90 days, and I thought, okay, I might make it. But I was fine. And so I think helping people understand that you need to be successful at things that you may not be prepared for, but here's how you do the best you can. So I think lessons learned, and also I think a lot of times all people really want is for someone to be there for them, a sounding board, a person that can talk through challenges they have and have a perspective, a person that can listen as they say, well, here's what I've tried. Do you have any ideas? Also, sometimes a connector. A person's interested in this industry or that industry, and you may know a person here, you may know a person there. Just a wide variety of discussions, support, and just check-ins and status and those kinds of things.
That's awesome, and I'm sure any young professional will be very lucky to have you in their corner. Speaking on that, what role do you see young professionals having in the new space industry and the opportunities that you see for them as you've been able to work either with junior officers or just a green engineer coming straight out of college?
So I think that so let's say all things being equal, and it's a very competitive world. Even more competitive it was when I was growing up, right? So when you're in an environment, most people have gone to good schools, most people have gotten good grades, most people have been very successful, right? So I think the role is that a person who's willing to take risks and get things done, a person who's willing to take on challenges and close on those challenges. If there's an opportunity to give a presentation, if there's an opportunity to put together a paper, there's an opportunity to get involved in some hands-on engineering. It's the people who are willing to thrust themselves forward and thrust themselves into the challenge, and then get some results. That's what goes a long way in my experience, and I don't expect that to change.
Speaking on that, do you have advice for someone who is just coming very early on in their career on how to be bold and how to take risks, or maybe be that person to be the new voice in the room and drive a new idea?
Absolutely. So I think that and having watched this for a very long time. So let's say you're in a staff meeting and there's 7 people in there and one of them's your supervisor. The people that are average, everyone's got their own portfolio and they've got their little job, their little piece. The people who do the best look at it one level up, right? They see how the pieces connect to a whole, right? Now their boss has that. Their boss has that whole. He or she has this whole thing, but you've got 1/7 of it, right? Or 1 part of 7. Think of it from your boss's perspective, right? Think of it for what outcome wouldn't just check the box. What outcome helped my boss become successful? And my approach has been, I feel like the boss and I are partners, right? The boss has the most stake in your success of anybody because if you look good, they look good. And so if you think of it from the perspective of 1 level up or even 2 levels up, right, and try to solve problems from that scale, not looking week to week, right, not looking staff meeting to staff meeting, looking outcome to outcome based on processes, right, based upon energy activity, right, inputs, something in between, outputs, right? So the small way of thinking is, okay, here's my input, and who knows what the heck, right? The bigger way of thinking is, all right, what's inside this box? What's happening? What is the boss trying to accomplish? What is it that makes the team successful? And you think of it as, if I'll go back to basketball, the person who makes the assists, the person who plays the hard defense, the person who does the rebounds, enabling the person to score. Great if you can score too, but there's only one ball, right? You might not be the best shot, right? So it's enabling the success of the overall organization through the eyes of your boss. Your boss's boss is what takes a person. And then some obvious thing, like what you want in your friends. If you say you're going to do something by 3 o'clock on Friday, have it in by 3 o'clock on Friday. Someone says it's going to meet you for a beer at 5 o'clock on Thursday. You want to say, oh, you want them to be there without having to call them 4 or 5 times. It's this kind of reliability, dependability, treating people the way you want to be treated, the fundamental glue of good humor and good camaraderie and good fellowship that makes a person an enjoyable person to be around, and then actually getting the work done.
I'd love to hear your perspective on accountability in leadership, or just as any team member. I think really often in engineering and all of space organizations, when something goes wrong, we really look for a root cause, and sometimes that's someone or something to blame. But I'd love to get your thoughts on just, as part of teamwork, how do you encourage accountability in your mentors and in your mentorship roles? Like, how do you bring in that collective ownership?
So the war story I'll use is something that Steve and I worked very recently. I've been advising him on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we asked each manager to have a diversity, equity, and inclusion goal, to document those goals. Then at the end of the year, document how they met against those goals. And then, we read through them and said, here's how you rack and stack. And so accountability is based upon what is it that you committed to doing, and then what did you do against those commitments. Although I really think the most important, now obviously there's going to be some snafus that have to be dealt with in an aggressive fashion. Everyone, you can click in a couple of minutes and go through what happened with the O-rings in the shuttle. I mean, it's almost most space folks should know that, where they breach certain limits of temperatures and they talk themselves out of it. Those are the rare occasions. The bigger occasions I look is that the opportunity to set goals and hold people accountable is really not about, in my view, the end result. It's about what behavior you want people to exhibit on a day-to-day basis. And so the real accountability is, who are you and what are you doing on an everyday basis, right, to achieve the goals of the overall organization. And goals help drive behavior, right? And it's the behavior that you're looking for that gives you an outcome. And the outcome may not be what the goal was, because sometimes the goal may not be achievable. Sometimes the goal may not be clear. Sometimes it may not be easy to define. So you take your best cut at it. In the end, you're saying, what kind of behaviors did we drive, right? What kind of process did we put in place, improve, start, in, right? And then what kind of overall collective results is that for the overall team? So that's what I think of when I think of accountability. I try to look more forward than backward and say, okay, what did we learn here? How can we adjust our behavior? Can we adjust it 1 degree? There's a lot of research on it. Everyone knows that, Einstein saying the most powerful force in the universe is compound interest. A small improvement on a regular basis gives you big results in not too long, I'd say not long, in the medium run, in a reasonably quick period of time. So it's about, can you improve what you're doing in support of the team and keep improving?
That is amazing perspective. Really, I'm so happy we've been able to talk so much about mentorship, organizational health, and all these building blocks of being successful in any organization, whether it be one of our NewSpace startups or the larger organizations that are affiliated in this industry. Really want to thank you so much for being open to answering these questions and giving us your perspective. It's been so awesome to have you here, and we really appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks for your time. You did a great job leading me through it. You made it easy, so thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ed. And so we're going to close out. I just want to remind everyone that this was produced through the Matthew Isakowitz Fellowship Program. Our applications for this year are now closed, but we do welcome anyone that would like to connect with the program to connect with us on social under @Matthew Fellowship, or check out our website. And I want to thank everyone here today, including Ed, for joining us on this week's Navigating NewSpace.